Hello everybody, it's Saturday morning, it's 11 o'clock and this is my first gardening clinic where you can send me your gardening queries and hopefully I can answer them. Just join me, subscribe, and you can then just ask me any question that you want. In the meantime, let me just tell you a little bit what's going on. Well, currently with the health crisis, I'm in self-isolation. And what does that actually mean? Well, it means obviously not going out or meeting people, and it means just making sure that I'm looking after my own health as well as the health of everybody else. But of course, being at home and being alone can actually be possibly bad for your mental and physical health. So how do we get around that? Well, the best way of doing that is really to get out and do some gardening. And when I mean gardening, I don't mean that you have to have a rolling estate with loads and loads of acres. It can be just a terrace, a patio, a window box, or just a normal back-sized garden. But the important thing is about getting out there, getting some fresh air, and also getting some exercise as you do the gardening. And it's quite surprising, really, how many calories you will burn when you do gardening, but it also helps with regards to stretching, being able to do more throughout the day. And for me personally, I find that gardening has really helped lift both my mental health as well as improve my physical well-being. And for me, it's about finding out how far I can reach, whether or not I can twist my upper torso, whether I can kneel or bend or whatever it might be. And it's then finding those limits and then working within them and then getting the best out of it. And of course, gardening is wonderful because you're surrounded by nature, you're surrounded by lovely plants, and what better? Now, as people come online and start asking me questions, I will obviously start answering them. But in the meantime, I've got a list of things which I will probably just go run through. And of course, if some of them are repeated, then I apologize, but it just enables you to get an idea of the sorts of thing that I'll be doing. So obviously, it's really your last opportunity, end of March, sort of April time, to order your bedding and your basket plants. So either go online, go to the garden centre if there's no one else around, but order online your wonderful plants ready for delivery so that you can then start your wonderful bedding displays and your hanging baskets. Now is also a brilliant time to give your greenhouse a scrub. Because seedlings will start to grow, you need to let as much light in there as possible. So just take some hot soapy water, take a nice sponge, and just wipe down all the surfaces and all the window panes. And that way, your plants will be happy. Now is also a really good time to start preparing your beds for the growing season. I make all my own homemade garden compost, and I urge everyone to do the same. And again, it doesn't matter if you have a big garden or not. You can compost on a small scale. There are some wonderful little composting systems out there that'll fit on a terrace or a balcony. And you can just add your sort of dry foods, your paper waste, and your clippings, of course, from all your plants. And that's what we do. We build and build and build it up. And then at the end of each year, we have this wonderful mixture that we spread around the garden. And we add about a 5 centimetre layer across all of our borders. And what that does is two things, really. One, it helps improve the soil. It also keeps moisture within the soil. And of course, the worms will do their wonder. They will actually come up, they will drag all that goodness down into the soil and enrich it. And I garden organically. And again, I try and urge people to garden organically. Please stay clear of herbicides and pesticides. A lot of the time, these sprays are wonderful things and they are changing, but they do sort of have an effect on the overall garden flora and fauna. So just be a little bit more mindful if you're going towards spraying something, because what you may be killing off might actually be harming some other beneficial pollinator. And then what I would really say is that obviously at this time of year, the temperatures are going to start increasing. So your container plants will start to dry out quicker. So they will need a little bit more watering, but don't overwater. a good little tip is to take your finger, stick it into the soil, and if it's still damp at the end of the tip of your finger, then there's probably still enough moisture in that pot. If it feels very, very dry, then give it a good water. And it's best to water a lot at once rather than sporadically and not a lot each time. If you can imagine it, if you water very, very deeply and lots of it, the water soaks down to the bottom, and that means the roots of the plants have to go all the way down to get their nutrients and their water. And that's the same in the beds as well. So water water a lot. If you just sort of sprinkle water across the surface, what that means is that the surface roots are going to be coming up more and more and more to the surface, and that top layer dries out the quickest. So then your plants get a little bit unhappy. So water much more deeply and regularly is probably the best way of describing it. Now, of course, as things start to grow in the garden, and I'm looking this way because I'm looking out across my garden, now is a perfect time to lift and divide perennials. And I will be showing this in a video clip coming up in one of my weekly tips. Obviously, perennials are herbaceous plants which normally die down over the winter period, and their roots are still in the ground, and then each year they start setting up their shoots and then their flowers during the spring and summer. So you might start seeing new growth coming up, and that's fine, it doesn't matter. But now is a great time to lift and divide. And what does that mean? Well, it means sort of either getting a spade or a fork in around the plant, digging it all up with the soil as well. And then you can sort of rinse off all of that soil so you can see where all the roots are, or you can just leave it as it is. And then depending upon the type of herbaceous perennial, you will either need a very sharp spade, a sharp knife, or just your hands. So for plants like hostas, they have a really sort of big sort of woody taproot at the bottom, and they're quite sort of difficult to sort of just pull apart. You can't really do it. So you need to either get a sharp spade or a knife and just cut straight through. Now, I know people are scared when they do this. They panic, they sort of think, oh, I'm going to kill my plant, but you'll be amazed. If you just take a nice sized clump and you just take a sharp spade, go straight through the middle and then through it again, so you get 4 quarters, you can then plant up each of those quarters into the garden, and each one will create a whole new plant. For more fibrous perennials, such as geraniums, for example, they have this sort of network and mesh of roots, and you can very easily just pull these apart and pull things off. And as long as you've got a good root system and a little bit of the plant on the top, is all that you need for a new plant. That will suffice. Plant it back into the ground at the same depth, water it in, and away you go. You've got these new plants. And that's a great way, really. If you sort of are starting a new patch and you're wondering, and obviously we all are at the moment, we're worried about our money and we're thinking how best to go about gardening. Well, dividing plants is a free way of doing it. And you can probably get, normally, if you buy say a 2-litre pot plant from a garden centre or online, you can normally make about 2 or 3 plants out of that. Grow it on for 1 season, then after that 1 season, you can lift and divide again and carry on and carry on and carry on. And of course, loved ones and friends and family might have plants that they can share with you. Ask people over social media when you're chatting to people via Skype or on the phone, do they have any plants or cuttings that they could send you? And then you can do the same. Send it back to them. Share that love of gardening. Now is also a really good time. If you love fuchsias, fuchsias will be growing. And what you need to do, you need to pinch out the tips of fuchsias, as well as sweet peas as well, for example. And what this does, it encourages bushy plants for the whole of the summer. Because if you imagine, if a plant is growing up and it keeps growing and keeps growing, if you pinch out that top, you're sort of interrupting that growth cycle. So what it does, it actually sends out new shoots wanting to grow. And then you get more shoots, therefore you get a bushier plant and a healthier plant for it as well. Now is also a brilliant time to move evergreen shrubs and trees. As long as the soil isn't frozen or waterlogged, you can start moving them around your garden. Keep it very, very simple. If it needs two people, maybe hang on for the time being if you're self-isolating, and wait until we can sort of do things in groups or with couples or whatever it might be. Of course, if you're the layer of compost on the top, and that way again it will keep the moisture in for a lot longer. So as you can see, this time of year there's a lot to do, and it's really about sort of keeping on top of things at the moment, because obviously things will be growing, they will be wanting to flower, they will be wanting to show their wonder. So you just need to keep on top. Obviously weeds will also be growing, so unfortunately we will need to do lots and lots of weeding. But that's part of gardening. If you've got kids, that's a great way to get them into gardening. Get them to pull out all the weeds, as long as they don't pull out the plants, obviously. But they can pull out all of the weeds while you're doing something else. Climbers and roses, for example, so rambling roses or climbing roses, and even sweet peas and clematis, as they will start growing, they will need to be tied into some kind of support. So you can use bamboo canes for this, you can use wooden poles, you can use trellises, but the important thing is to tie it in, because not a lot of the time the plants don't have their own sort of suckering system like ivy does, for example, where they send out aerial roots and then they attach to the wall or surface. So things like clematis and climbing roses, tie them in and use just simple twine, do a nice figure of eight, so there's sort of a buffer between the plant and the actual support of this string, and just keep an eye on it, and each time it grows, tie it in. If you're sort of also worried about the fact that we've been having lots of rain, lots of wind, check your ties that are around your trees. Trees obviously will continue to grow, and as they start to grow, your ties around them will need to be adjusted. And also they may have come loose in this recent weather. The last thing you want, and we've probably all seen photos of it online, is where someone has put a tie around a tree attached to a post, and they've forgotten the fact that the tree actually grows, and the poor tree has grown with the tie actually within it, and it's sort of almost strangling that poor tree. The tree will obviously probably carry on because it will just grow around it, but it's best practice to obviously not do that. So just double check them. Also, now is a really great time to prune your penstemons. If you love penstemons, these are these lovely flowers that sort of look a bit like foxglove flowers. So they're like little hoods, and there's loads and loads of them on each stem, and they dangle down. They come in a multitude of colours. Cut back all the old shoots right down to the base, provided that there is new growth at the bottom. And if there are no shoots at the base, then just cut above the lowest set of leaves. So just above that lowest set of leaves. And then that way, again, you're creating a lovely bushy plant for the new season. Obviously, as well now, we've with all this wet and horrible weather, a lot of the herbaceous plants that you may left on over the autumn and the winter time have got all their tatty leaves on them, and now is the last time really to start cutting back before the lots of new growth starts coming up. So get out there with some secateurs or some pruners and just cut back all that tatty growth. Also, forsythia. As soon as the forsythia has finished flowering, I mean, ours is still out in full glory at the moment, but once those yellow flowers have gone over, that's the time to prune it. Prune it to keep that shrub into shape and to the size that you actually want. Now, I know I've had a query from one of my clients, actually, lovely Sheena, who I designed a garden for, and she's been growing some pelargoniums over the winter, and she wants to know how to make more plants, really. Well, the best time to really do it is in August and September time. But I found that if you've got a nice warm windowsill or you've got growing mats, then you can really take cuttings almost any time of the year. What you want to do is that you want to look for nice long growth where you've got a couple of leaf buds on each one, and then take your secateurs, cut above a leaf bud, leaving sort of around about sort of a 12 or 15 centimetre length of the pelargonium stem. Then remove all the lower leaves and then cut just below a leaf bud. And that just below that leaf bud is where all the energy is going to be, and that's where all the new root systems are going to grow from. And then just take a simple terracotta pot, a 9 centimetre terracotta pot, with some good peat-free home or homemade compost. Add some perlite or some grit just to add for some drainage, and then put those seedlings around the outside of the pot to about halfway down. Don't cover them with plastic because they will be susceptible to mildew. Keep them off. You could give them the occasional spray if they start to look very dry, but within no time at all, they will start to set root, especially if you've got some heat coming up from underneath. You'll probably see roots appearing in sort of around 4 to 6 weeks, and within 8 weeks, they'll be probably popping out the bottom. You will then simply lift them out of that pot, move them into a new pot all of their own, plant them into it, and away you go. You've got some new plants for free. And of course, pelargoniums, some people call them geraniums, I know, but I'm talking about the pelargoniums such as ivy leaf pelargoniums, regal pelargoniums, rather than the herbaceous type geranium. Now, obviously, as end of March and end of April happens, tulips and daffodils will be going over as well. So keep deadheading them. With daffodils, obviously, you get the stem, then you get the seed capsule on the top behind the actual flower, and as the flower dies, you sort of end up with that seed capsule. All you need to do is go out with your fingers and pinch off and remove that seed capsule. Leave the leaves as they are, don't tie them up, don't do anything with them, leave them out in the garden so that they can photosynthesize and send food and nutrients back down into the bulb, ready for the new season next year. I know sometimes the leaves look a little bit tatty. In borders, you can sort of disguise it a bit more by planting up some herbaceous plants around it or grasses or anything like that. Alliums are a perfect example. They come out obviously a little bit later, but their leaves and sort of down below are really, really ugly. So you really want to sort of try and disguise them. If you've got loads and loads of daffodils in the lawn, again, best to leave them, let them die back naturally. I know it means that you can't really mow the lawn at that point. You can mow around them, you can mow sort of paths around them. And then once they've all died back, then you can go out, cut them back, or just mow straight over them. What's another good thing to do at this time of year? Okay, if you love growing vegetables. So this year, obviously, with all of us, again, worried about sort of work and worried about where the money is coming in, why not start growing your own vegetables and fruit from home? We're quite lucky here. We've got a little mini orchard. So we've got some apples and pears and plums and a cherry tree, but the birds always seem to end up getting the cherries, but that's just nature. And then we love growing strawberries and raspberries. But this year we are going to grow tomatoes, lettuces, cut and come again lettuces, some more herbs. We've got a little herb garden, but we're going to add some basil and thyme, and as well as some peppers. We're going to grow some peppers outside as well and see how they do. But if you're growing vegetables in beds, then obviously the weeds will be growing. So you need to completely remove all of those weeds before you do anything. And when I say growing vegetables, you can obviously grow from seed, which is obviously a lot cheaper, but you can also buy vegetables as plug plants. And you'll see in video tip 1 how I deal with plug plants. And although what I'm showing you are calendula flowers, the same principle applies to plug plants of vegetables as well. You can pop them up into a 9 centimetre pot plant, grow them on for a few weeks until all the sort of worries of frost have gone away, and then you can plant them outside into the ground. Also, again, similar to your herbaceous borders, add a 5 centimetre layer of compost across all of your vegetable beds. And they'll love that. They'll absolutely love you for doing that. If you have problems bending over, then why not obviously lift the garden up? So raised beds for you might be the answer. If you can find raised beds or make raised beds out of sleepers, for example, what you're actually doing there is you've got quite a nice sort of thickness on the sleeper itself. So you can actually perch down and sit on your bottom as you garden. And before you know it, you'll be doing a hell of a lot more than you probably thought you would have done because you're sitting down and just enjoying what you're actually doing. If you can't twist your body or you can't lean forward very much, there are some wonderful new sort of raised tables or trunk-like planters out there where, say, for example, if you're in a wheelchair like I am, you can get underneath them with your legs underneath, and then you can just be up here planting away. Now, you don't have as much depth, obviously, as you would in a raised bed or if you would in the ground, but you can still grow lettuces, carrots, parsnips, radishes, so many different things. So don't let that put you off. Have a go at it. Why not? Just try it. You don't have to go for long carrots. There are now lovely little stumpy carrots that you can grow. Also, asparagus, especially in April, will be growing very, very well. And it's important to obviously harvest your asparagus spears when they're no more than sort of around 15, 18 centimeters tall, because otherwise they go a little bit sort of fibrous-y. Cut them off when they're young and tender, and then especially when they're very young, you can even eat them raw straight from the garden. If you're growing plants, sort of pea plants, then it's a good idea to put pea supports in. And the way I do that is if I've been cutting down some of the hedges or some of the trees or some of the shrubs, I just use that as the plant support. So twiggy sticks, really, and just place them all around where you're going to put your peas. The peas will then just grow through that natural cage-like structure of twiggy material, and that's it. You don't have to worry about them otherwise. Carrot seedlings, you can start thinning carrot seedlings as well in April. To achieve a good sized carrot, you should thin them. But obviously you just need to be aware of carrot fly. There are now sort of some carrot fly resistant carrots out there. So if you do need to thin out, the best time to do this is in the evening when the carrot flies are fewer. There's fewer of them around at night time. So do it at night time. If, like me, you love fruit trees, like we do here, obviously late frosts can damage blossoms. So cover them on cold nights with fleece. So for example, we've got some espaliered apricots and pears and peaches. So if it gets very, very cold here, or we know that the frosts are coming, we'll just cover that up with fleece just overnight, and then take it off during the daytime so the sun can get to them and the bees can get to them as well. Obviously, with the weather improving, then lawns will start to be growing as well. So now is a good time to prepare the soil and sow lawn seed, and then just keep the ground moist, not absolutely soaking wet, but keep it moist, and that will allow the seeds to germinate. If you want an instant lawn, of course, you can go for turf, and now is a good time to do it. Again, if the ground isn't waterlogged or frozen, prepare the soil properly, and then you can lay your turf and then water. Remember to water in a new turfed lawn; it does need it. It's also a great time now also to repair bare patches in the lawn, and if it's towards an edge. A good way of doing that is to take a spade, dig sort of a square around where that damage is, turn it around so that the damage then becomes more on the outside of the lawn. Just put in some sort of fresh compost with some garden seed, water it in, and that's it. That's all you need to do. To tidy up lawns very, very quickly, a good tip is to trim the edges. If you just trim the edges of a lawn, sometimes it can make all the difference, and it can make a lawn look absolutely wonderful. Even if you just want to hang on from cutting the actual turf itself for a wee while, just go around and cut the edges, and it will just keep it tidier. Well, that's been 25 minutes, guys. So hopefully you'll see that there's lots of things to do. I've just had another one before I go. Someone has just asked, when's the best time to plant hedging? The best time really is between November and the end of March during bare root period, sorry. This is when hedging plants are sent to you, and they don't have any soil on them. They're just literally, the roots are bare, and that's why they're called bare roots. And all you need to do is prepare the ground ready for them to go in, dig a trench, dig a hole, put them in at the same depth as they would have been in the soil. You can normally tell because you'll have the actual sort of main stem branch coming off from the hedge, and then you'll have the roots coming down, and you'll probably see a slight different coloration within the stem, and that will show you where the soil level was. Plant them at exactly the same depth, water them in, and away you go. And then those plants, all they want to do is grow straight away, because they would have been dug up straight from a field and had all their soil removed. So now is the best time to do that. You've got a few more weeks. Sometimes, depending upon the weather, the bare root system does sometimes go into April, but the normal period is between November and March. Of course, after March, you can buy hedges in pots, and you can just grow them as you would any other plant when you buy them in a pot. Prepare the soil, prepare the hole, plant them in, cover them back up again, water them in, mulch over the top, and away you go. So that's it, guys. That's half an hour gone already. Thank you for joining my first live gardening clinic. If you've got more questions, then please send them through to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Someone just said thank you. That was very helpful. That's very kind of you. So please just send in all your comments and queries, and see you next Saturday at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.